Layer mask. Hi guys, today we'll discuss a very important and interesting topic. In the previous lessons, you and I talked about layers, but the layers that we used were the most ordinary simple layers. In fact, there are many variations of other layers in Photoshop. For example, adjustment layers, layers with smart objects, vector layers, and others. And in all these layers, such an important element as a layer mask is used. Therefore, if you really want to reach the top in Photoshop, you can't make it without knowing how to work with a mask. Mask can help you to create a huge number of different special effects. And today we'll try to understand how this absolutely irreplaceable tool works. By the way, all these changing effects on the image that you are now seeing on the screen were created with the help of a layer mask. I decided that it would be better if we immediately start practicing this tool on concrete examples. So, we have this landscape. Our goal is to merge two different landscapes, winter and summer, with a smooth transition. I have already opened a winter landscape, and now I'm going to open the summer one and edit it to the winter landscape. I will remind you how to do it. One of the ways. Press the keyboard shortcut Ctrl plus A, Ctrl plus C. Go back to the file with winter and press Ctrl plus V. I added this layer, on which I have a file with a summer landscape. And now the most interesting thing begins. You already know that the layer can be made more transparent if you adjust the opacity settings. It is here. For example, we can reduce it, and the layer that is below will shine through the layer that is above. But sometimes it is necessary to make sure that not the entire layer is completely transparent. Some parts of it should become transparent, and some remain non-transparent at the same time. In our case, these non-transparent areas will be considered masked. Now let's see how it really works. I will make the opacity as it was and edit the mask to this layer. You can do this, for example, by clicking this icon in the layers panel. Click, and as you can see, I have an additional white element. It is a mask. By default, the mask has a white color, and the white color in the mask means full opacity. If we added a black color to the mask, then those areas that will be painted in black will be transparent, and the areas that remain gray will be semi-transparent. And to make it a little clearer, let's do it. First, I want to draw your attention to the fact that since we now have two icons on the layer, when we have this one active, it means that the mask is on. And if we select this icon, click on it, then we will have an active layer, which we worked with in previous lessons. Let's go back to the mask, and to make some areas more transparent, let's take for example a black brush, and now I'll use this brush to draw on the image. Look, I'm drawing on the image. That's how I get a black piece. It's a part of the transparent area. Meanwhile, I have a soft brush. Look, the brush can be soft and hard. Since my brush is soft, the transitions between these two landscapes are quite soft. If I take a hard brush right now, I have a hard brush, and try to draw with it. Then, you see, I get such a clear border. And again, an additional black area appeared on the thumbnail icon of the mask layer, which just shows us that this area has become transparent. I will cancel my actions, as I don't need this piece, and we will continue. Of course, we can change the size of the brush and its transparency. Right now we have, well, let's assume it as 100%. And therefore, I had completely transparent areas in those parts of the image where I was using a black brush. I will take a soft brush because it's more beautiful. And if I will make opacity like this and use a brush, then look, I have an image that is on the layer below. But at the same time, it is not as sharp as the previous case, and a gray color appears on the mask icon, which means partial transparency. In our case, this transparency corresponds to the transparency of the brush, and this is how we can display those areas that we want to display. It depends on our artistic preferences, but let's say we did something wrong. And the most important advantage of the mask will help us. When we make some areas transparent, it don't disappear completely, it's simply masked. It's just hidden from the eyes of the beholder. But if we want to bring them back, then we can do it easily. So we used a black brush before, and now we need a white one. By the way, if suddenly you don't have black and white colors by default right now, then you need to press D, and then you'll have a black and white color. And of course, when we take a brush, we use the color that is in the square on top. If I want to switch to white now, I either click on this arrow or press X, and the squares change places. So I have a white color with a non-transparency. I can, for example, make this area a little less transparent using this brush, like that. But if I want to completely remove this transparent area that I have somewhere, I will have the non-transparent of 100%. And look, I can return the image to its original state. So the black color makes the areas transparent. The white color restores their original opacity. Now we have done all this using the brush tool, but in fact there are other tools that can be used to make fills in black or white. For example, we can use a gradient. I will now create a new layer for demonstration. I click on this icon. I am creating a new layer. By the way, look, I am going to need white and black squares now. I press D and they turn white and black. And now I will fill the layer that I just created with white. So I filled it up by pressing Ctrl plus backspace, but we'll talk about this later. This is a small digression, and let's look at the gradient tool. It is located here and is called by G key. When we select this tool, we can create a gradient between two or more different colors. Now we will consider only the black and white version. We must have black and white colors active here. Or we can choose black and white from the ready-made samples. If I hold down the left mouse button while this tool is active and swipe it from right to left, I get this black to white gradient. I can do it in any direction. For example, from one corner to another. And then this gradient will change. I can even do this from the center, for example. So I get a black color in the area where I start to move the cursor, because it is on top. Thus, we can change the direction of a gradient in any convenient direction, and there are different types of gradients. You can check them by yourself. Each of these buttons is responsible for how the gradient will be created. For example, we have radial and diagonal gradients. This one. See, something like this. But gradient is not the topic of our lesson, and so we will focus on the simplest gradient, on this one, which fills linearly, and see how it can be used when working with a mask. Although, of course, other types of gradient can be used too. Now let's see how it works. Therefore, I will now remove this layer. I remind you that this can be done by pressing the left mouse button and dragging it to this basket. That is, now I make the mask active by clicking on the thumbnail of the mask. I have the gradient tool active, and I remember that the area will be transparent, where the black color begins. That's why I choose this edge. Here I assume that I will have a transparent area and move the mouse cursor to the left side. And as you can see, this area of the winter landscape becomes transparent for me. This right section of the upper layer becomes transparent, and the landscape begins to shine through from below. And if I do the opposite, then as you can see, this is what we will get. It would be possible, of course, to stop there, but we can combine the work of a brush and a gradient. Therefore, I take a brush, since I want to make some areas more transparent. So I took a black brush. You can adjust its size by pressing the square brackets, left and right. I press the left one and make the brush smaller. And now I added the snow parts on this layer. And let's say I want this area to be less transparent. Let me do it. Rather, on the contrary, I want it more transparent, because the lower layer shines through. Here I can change the settings of the brush, somehow make it medium transparency. Let's say making a glade like this. But this section, for example, I want to make completely non-transparent. Then I take a white brush by clicking on the arrow. I set 100%, and look, here I have the summer part of our landscape coming back. There are a lot of opportunities for creativity here, and you can do it in a variety of ways, and every time you'll get some new interesting result. I take the black brush again, for example. Here I added, for example, this part. I use a white brush in a different way. You can experiment for a very long time with different locations, transparent and non-transparent areas. Look at what I got. There can be a lot of options, And once again, pay attention to the icon of the mask layer, where the transparent and non-transparent areas are displayed. Your homework is to create something like this. You will need two files with a summer and a winter landscape, and you need to combine them in some beautiful way using a mask layer. And you already remember this image that I have shown at the beginning of our lesson. It is made on the same principle. If you look at this palette, then everything will become clear to you. I hope that you will be able to do this. In addition to everything else that we were doing right now, free transform modes were also used here. For example, when I added images to the source file, they were very large, and I reduced them. For example, now I take this file, selected Ctrl+A, copy, Ctrl+C, and paste, Ctrl+V. Okay, you see, it is very large. It is much larger than the image that we have. I press Ctrl+T and reduce the image to the scale I need. Here, for example, if necessary, I can mirror it. I can do anything. Let's say you are satisfied with this option. And then I added a mask here, and I do what I think is necessary. For example, like this. Well, or something else. And then use the brush tool. These are the general explanations for this exercise, but I still want you to figure it out on your own. Yes, you can also change, of course, transparency. Here, for example, like this. Just be creative. And you'll practice what we did in previous lessons by doing this exercise. We have two homework assignments. I showed how to do one of them in detail. I hope you can handle the second one. We continue to study layer masks. And now on the screen you can see what we are going to do today. Well, let's get started. Now we'll take a portrait of the girl and make it partly black and white and partly colored. And we will do it using masks. And as you have probably already guessed, we will need an additional layer, since a mask implies the presence of several layers. So let's make a copy of the layer. Now, since we have a black and white image here, we need to make one of the layers black and white. Let's do it. We need to go to the image menu, click Adjustments and select Desaturate, or press Shift plus Ctrl plus U. Now we can adjust our image a little more to make it more contrasting and expressive. In the future, we will study in great detail all the possibilities of increasing brightness and contrast. And now we'll make it easier. We will just go to the menu and select Adjustments, Brightness and Contrast, and click Edit Contrast in the appeared window. Adjust about up to the size and maybe add a little bit of brightness, like that. Okay, and now the most interesting thing, the mask itself. If you remember, the last time we added a mask to a layer using an icon, and we had such a white mask. Initially the layer was completely colored, but we added transparent areas with a black brush. But it is possible to go from the opposite. I mean, we can edit a black mask, making the layer completely transparent, and conversely, edit some visible details. Let's remove the mask that we have now. I select it and click on the trash bin, delete, and we will create a new mask. In order for its application to be effective, we need to swap the layers, but we can do this while the bottom layer is locked, so we need to unlock it. Double click on it and it is unlocked, and swap places, like that. Now we're adding a layer mask to the top color layer that we have, but not in the same way as we did last time. I press Alt and click on the mask icon, and that's what we see. In fact, my top layer, which was completely colored before, becomes invisible, completely transparent. Well, remember that black is the color of transparency on the mask. And now I want to make some parts non-transparent. In fact, I want to make lips non-transparent. I take a white brush, because we need to restore the image. I select the necessary size of the brush. I have a soft one. Using square brackets, I zoom in the image so that everything is neat, and I start to paint over the contour of the lips with a brush. If the brush is transparent, then my color will not be completely restored. It will be restored only to the extent of opacity of the brush. I periodically change the brush size in order to make everything neat. And that's what I got. And as a result, we get this. You can immediately see those elements in mask that we needed to make non-transparent. Thus, you can choose wherever to create a regular mask, a white mask that is created by default, or press Alt and create a black mask that will partially make the layer to which it is added completely transparent, and then display some details. And you can also create a mask in the Layers menu. Select Layer Mask, Reveal All, and you will have a mask layer added, like that. But usually no one does it this way, because it is much more convenient to use this icon at the bottom of the Layers menu. Of course, now we don't need this additional mask, so we click on the trash bin and remove this mask. After that, we can save our file, for example in JPEG, if we want to show it to someone already, and post it in social networks, or in PSD if we are going to do something with in Photoshop later. It is your first task for this lesson, and you and I are moving on to the second one. Let's see how we can use a mask to separate an object from the background, and subsequently replace this background with another one. A little ahead of myself, I'll tell you that for such manipulations, we always use selection tools. Now we'll talk a little about this topic, but the main focus will still be on studying this mask. So, let's start with the fact that we need to unlock this layer, on which we have a girl on a white background. You already know how to do it. Now we take a tool called Quick Selection. This tool is the third from the top. It is called by the layer W. Please note that there are two tools here, a magic wand and a quick selection. A repeated pressing of the W change these tools between each other. Now we need to choose not a magic wand. We need to choose the quick selection tool. Took it. Please note that you have the same settings at the top as me. The icon with plus should be active. Just like the brush, the selection tool has its size adjusted by square brackets. So let's take a slightly larger size. And look what I'm doing now. I'm just sweeping along the contour of the girl's figure, and now her silhouette is selected. If suddenly somehow I, for example, captured some extra area, which we don't need here now, then in this case I can press Alt. My icon changes to a minus, and I can correct this area. I can also use a square bracket to reduce the size of the brush. Press Alt again and make sure that I have selected exactly the area that I need. Like this. Let me remove unnecessary details. Here I got a selection. And now the most interesting thing is that we remove the background using a mask. Click on the mask icon and we don't have any background anymore. Now all we have to do is edit the background. So I added the background. I had it on a higher layer. I swap places, arrange the way I need. Press Ctrl+T, zoom in, so that there are no unnecessary areas. Everything will depend on you, on how you will develop your creative idea. Because for me, let's say, in this example that I made, I did it this way. You see that I have copied the background several times. Somehow, with the help of masks, I removed something, added something. I added the same image, or the bokeh here. Bokeh is such colored, glowing circles, if you remember. And it's my result. You can do this as you want, whatever you like. You can analyze it, but of course it would be much better if you showed me creativity, and did perhaps even something much better. But let's go back to our image. We just talked about some aesthetic moments, but don't forget that there are also technical ones. After all, if you look closely, you can clearly see that the contour of the girl, it is rather sharp. It looked like an application that was cut out and simply glued. Of course, I would like this contour to be softer, and the mask will help us again. Click twice on the thumbnail of the mask layer and we have a window like this. In this lesson, we'll consider all its properties, because for this we still need to give other examples. And now we'll look at the feather. Feather implies editing the edges of your image. If you increase the feather value, then look, edges become softer. I want them even more softer. And the further I move the slider, the softer these edges become. Take a look at what it become. So, okay, our value will be like this. Also, here you can see the density value. In fact, density is the same thing as transparency. Now we have it 100%. And these areas, which are related with the background, look completely transparent. But after all, the mask doesn't completely remove any elements. It just makes them hidden. If we reduce this density, we'll immediately see a white background. And here on the layer mask icon, you can see that the black color has changed to gray. Can you imagine how much you can do with a mask? You have a lot of opportunities. Let's return it to 100%. And we will close it here. And that's what we have got so far. Now the outline of the girl is already quite acceptable. We can edit some other details to this image and bring this image to the desirable result. For example, like this. I do not require you to repeat exactly what I have. I'm just showing you an idea. You can even take some of your own images as background images and use them. You don't have to use my pictures. But it is better to take this girl, because if you take more complex image, you may not be able to select it yet, because there are some nuances. Therefore, now we take a simple figure, and as for the background, I hope to see interesting creative works from you. In general, this was the second homework assignment for today. And as an example, so that you understand the possibilities of using the mask tool, I want to show you something. Very often there are images in which there is some reflection, and at the same time a shadow from objects. Especially those who are going to work in design probably know that this is a very commonly used technique. And let's see how this can be done with a mask. We'll just take a slightly different image. We'll have such fruits, and we'll do something like this. If you look at the layers panel, then of course you'll understand everything. There is a main image here. There is an inverted copy of it, which has an applied mask, and with the help of a gradient, it is made transparent. And look, usually the further away the reflection is from the object, the more blurry it looks. And it is on this principle that the gradient was made here. If you go to this mask, well, let's probably even try to repeat it now. So I take the gradient. And look, I should have the most transparent area at the bottom. I start moving from the black color and pull up the mask. And you see, if I started for example from here, it would be like this. Even more transparent. If I start from the very bottom, it turns out exactly like this. That is, you can make any reflection you want, but there is also a small shadow here. If I remove it, it looks like this. It looks a little unnatural. Therefore, I created an additional clean layer on which I just drew a shadow with a brush. How do we do this? Let's try to repeat it again too. When this layer is active, I click on the icon and create a clean layer. Well, it is created about the layer that is currently active. Then, using the eyedropper tool, I take a color sample from here, so that our shadow is more or less realistic. I take the brush tool and just draw. Well, something like this. But now I'm doing a little rough. I need to be more careful, of course. Reduce transparency. And that's what we get. Well, it's not as beautiful as I wanted. Let's leave it this way, for example. Thus, I offer you another method to gain skills working with a mask. And I really hope that now you'll easily cope with this tool in absolutely any situation. Therefore, I hope that everything will be fine, that everything will work out for you. Let's see what is the difference between mirroring or some other rotation of the entire image, when all layers are turned on and rotated by a certain angle, or mirrored in the same direction. This is the first situation. And the second situation is when we need to change the location of only one layer, when we need to mirror only one layer. Let's talk about this using the concrete example. Let me make a copy of the layer now. Let's place them like this, so that we can see what is going on. And look, if we go to the image menu, select image rotation, flip vertically, then we immediately flip both of our images. If we use this menu, the operation is applied to the entire image as a whole. Let's cancel this action and do it differently now. I select only the layer that I need to change. I will choose the bottom layer. Now I'm choosing the bottom layer, which will be our reflection. After that, I choose the free transform mode. I press keyboard shortcut Ctrl+T. A frame like this appears. The same action could be selected via the edit menu. So, we have selected the free transform. I clicked the right mouse button and here I choose to flip vertically. But please note, in this case only the layer that we have selected is mirrored. After that I can, for example, place it like this and then apply a mask and make a reflection. I can also apply free transform to multiple layers. For example, I can select several layers by pressing Ctrl. I take it all back. Look, I'm making two layers active at once by pressing Ctrl. Similarly, I press Ctrl+T. I press the right mouse button and select Flip Vertically. And in this case, all the layers which I have selected are flipped vertically. I press Enter. Let's go back and repeat once again. how to flip only one layer. We select only one layer. We have only one active layer. Press Ctrl plus T. Press the right mouse button. Select the transform we need. In this case, flip vertically. Then we move it in the direction we need. And click on empty space or press Enter. Then apply a mask and, for example, take a gradient and apply a reflection, like that. I hope that this operation will now be more understandable and you'll be able to do this task. It was Peter Romanov and AIM School. See you next time.